Today I want to try something which I've wanted to do for ages, which is try and recreate the Black Album drum sound. I'm not an expert when it comes to sound by any means. I just want to learn by doing, so this is a fun experiment. So I'm going to try it, you know, in my relatively small room. It's not a massive room by any means. It's a pretty small room to record drums in, and yes, see how close we can get. 8 mics, so it's not going to be like the amount of channels they were using on the Black Album. It probably would have been something insane, like, I don't know, 20, maybe even like 30 mics on the kits. I know it was outrageous anyway, the amount of mics they used. I want to break this into 4 categories, you know, drums and tuning, miking technique, actual technique and performance on the kit, and then last but not least, mixing. So I want to try and kind of do an overview of my approach to each of these and trying to get this sound. So starting with drums, I'm using my Tama Superstar kit. I don't have pinstripes, which is what Lars used, but tuning's going to help me out here. So I've got coated heads, but got some muffling on them. Got the heads tuned low and slappy. So that's going to help us get that kind of attack that we're looking for. Okay, snare. This is the real main one. So I have my Pearl Sensitone Bronze, 14 by 6.5, which is an absolute beast of a snare. And yeah, I tried to tune it up a bit before it lost its body. So the Black Album snare sound is obviously massive, and it's got a lot of top end to it too, so it's kind of hard. You don't want to tune the drum super low, because then you're not going to get that top end, but you don't want to tune it too high because you're going to lose all the body. So I kind of went with a medium tuning here. So you'll hear that. A little bit of muffling, not too much. Again, we want to preserve some of that top end crack to the drum. And a massive component is rim shots. Got to be slamming rim shots to get this kind of tone. So with the kick, again, like the toms, we have it tuned really low. See there, there's some flex in the head, most definitely. So having the drum tuned low kind of pronounces the click and the attack of the drum. And it's definitely what we need for this sound. All right, so in terms of cymbals, I got my HHX Evolution Hi-Hats, really nice. And for crashes, I got my 18-inch Evolution and my 20-inch A18 Crash. So kind of A-custom-y, A-Zildjian-y almost sounding cymbals. Bright, crisp sound, so perfect for this kind of tone. And then I got my AAX X-treme China for a few accents. It's seen better days, but still sounds great. So moving on to mics, I've got my spaced overheads, my spaced pair, large diaphragm condensers, and I normally go for a bit more drums in my overheads, but with this I'm kind of looking more at the cymbals. So here I got it kind of placed in between the hats and the crash to try and get a balance there, and then over here in between my crash and my China. Yeah, and then, you know, nothing too crazy. Close mics on all the drums, snare and toms, trying to get a kind of decent balance. And then, you know, I can't do a drum recording without this. So this is the Wurst technique. It's one of my favorite mic positions. You know, so this is just going to help me get a bit more punch into the snare. This was the one interesting thing I done. I actually, if you can see it, put my kick mic, my Audix D6 in the bass drum, which is something I've never done before in this way. Because what I done was I disassembled my kickstand and put it in bit by bit through the porthole, which is quite challenging, and then I put the mic in there because I just want as much click as possible for this kind of, you know, metal kick tone. Now last but certainly not least, we have my MXL R144 ribbon mic. So this is a really nice affordable ribbon mic. And yeah, I just got that up top in the corner of the room to try and get as much kind of ambience as possible. So yeah, it's not the biggest room in the world, but got a decent amount of distance there from the kit. I tried a few different ways. So it's a figure of 8 mic. So it's basically facing the kit, and then the back of it is kind of facing the wall to get more of that reflection. So it ended up sounding really nice. So I said I'd also mention performance. So with performance, there's only really one rule here, which is play really loud. In all seriousness, playing loud, of course, is really important to getting the kind of attack out of the drums that you need for this tone. But also, it really helps with mixing because, say for example, the snare. To get this kind of sound, we want to gate the snare to make it really punchy. But if you play the snare a little too light, what that will mean is it will kind of blend in with the rest of the kit in the snare mic. So say I'm hitting the snare at a reasonable volume and everything else at a reasonable volume, it will mean that the snare isn't that far above everything else. So I can't gate it as hard, because if I gate it, I'll lose everything because everything's kind of in and around the same volume. Okay, so this is the Logic session for my Enter Sandman cover. So I got my 8 mics here. So you'll see I've duplicated the snare, but I didn't end up using the second snare. So basically I duplicated it and gated one really hard, and then the second one kind of just left open to see what that would sound like. Sometimes it can work nicely, but yeah, I didn't end up using it. And I've duplicated the room mic because I did some stuff with automation and it just was easier. I'm sure there's a better way of doing it, but that's the way I done it anyway. So yeah, let's have a listen to the drums raw. Cool, so we got a decent starting point, but as you can tell, it's pretty dull. Doesn't have that Black Album sound at all to it yet, you know, because it's really going to come into how we process the drums, especially in a small room. If we're in a big room and we engineered it correctly, it probably would already sound massive, but, you know, it's a small room, so it's pretty dry. First of all, what I done was I inverted the phase on the overheads. So massive difference to the body in the snare. So I highly recommend, you know, flipping the phase on different things, see how the phasing is. People always talk about it, but it's really important. So in Logic, there's this plugin called the Gain plugin. It's in Utilities. And yeah, it's just got a button where you can flip the phase. But other DAWs, I'm pretty sure, you know, they have really easy ways of getting that. But in Logic, at first, I was like, how do you do this? But yeah, that's how you do it, in case you didn't know. So yeah. Now what we're going to do is go to the room mic. And we're going to enable those plugins. So by just doing that, we're already getting somewhere. So let's have a listen to room mic. So pretty nice balanced sound to it. So now let's add a compression. Just a preset in Logic that I played around with. And let's added some reverb, took out some mid-range, added some top end to get it nice and wet. Let's look at the EQ. Nothing too crazy here. Some mid-range taken out. Some bottom because I didn't want to get really boomy, but I found there was plenty of low end in this kind of 80 hertz frequency. Anyway, initially I had it bumped up more, but it was already sounding pretty beast there. And I boosted top end because it's a ribbon mic, so it's pretty dark. So yeah, ribbon mics are really cool as room mics. All right. So the main issue now is the kick. Sounds big, but it doesn't have that snap that we're used to hearing. I had some compression. I added some extreme EQ here. You know, bringing out the top end on metal kicks is really important. So I kind of went pretty crazy here, but, you know, whatever sounds good. So I flipped the phase and also I put a gate on it to tighten it up a bit. Cool. So let's have a listen. Okay, let's move on to the snare, because you know that iconic snare drum sound we have on the Black Album. I'm going to mute this other snare for us. So I'm just bringing a lot of smack out of the snare. EQ wise, some low end, some top end, got rid of some mids, nothing too crazy. Have a gate on it. So let's have a listen. Oh, and most importantly, I was wondering why it sounded dry. So here's the snare. So again, this is all one take, so there's some snares that could be played a lot better, but this is all one take. The only bit of editing is I had to make some comps. Just 2 bass drums I had to sub out for another take, because if you listen, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I had these 2 pops that were pretty annoying, so thankfully I had another take that I could just sub in there. Okay. Let's go back to the snare. So that's the kind of tone. Again, this is something I've learned. That kind of tone to me sounds terrible, but in the context of the mix, it works really well. So I've gated it real heavily. I've kind of masked that with a reverb. And yeah, bit of compression and some top end. So it's just real smacky. That's about it. When we put that in the context of the entire mix, though, it sounds really good. Without the plugins, as you hear, with the compression, the gate, the EQ, all this stuff, it really helps give the snare drum some punch. And I didn't flip the phase here. I've just converted the snare to mono. Okay, moving on. So one of my favorite miking techniques, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, is the Wurst technique. So here's the Wurst mic. So it's just an SM57, kind of in between the toms, snare, and kick. That's actually it, just dry. I actually like the tone of it even just there. But let's go over and add plugins. Got a light gate on it. I've got some EQ, taking out the rumble, adding some top end, then getting rid of some kind of nasty, super high end. Might sound kind of nasty on its own, but we add that to the mix. Just adds a lot of focus and punch again to the snare, and even helps out the kick a bit. Having only 8 mics was quite limiting, so yeah, I would have liked to have some more mics, especially for the cymbals. So for the overheads, I ended up making them really kind of brittle and harsh. So they sound really hollow, but in the context of the mix, it really works. So with the snare and with the Wurst as well. So the Wurst really helps out the snare there with the rooms. And of course the kick. So, you know, making sure your mics are working together and you can get some pretty beefy drum tones in a small room. So one other thing I want to show is this duplicated room mic. So I'm getting the ambience from the room mics and then the kind of body from the close mics on the toms. So rack tom and the floor tom. So boring on their own. Sounds pretty cool. All right, so that's pretty much everything. But a big part also was with the stereo out, I added some compression, a multi-presser. I really love this, using multi-presser on stuff, you know. Just trying to get it super aggressive. What else I got here? An exciter. So if I take away the exciter and the EQ. See, this is what I love about trying to recreate tracks. To my ears, that sounds like too much high end. But I've learned through experimentation that, you know, there's a lot more high end often than you think. So in the track. Just gives it that kind of high fidelity that you hear in the original. So there's my attempt at a Black Album drum sound. Again, not perfect, just trying to learn by doing. But I was actually pretty happy with the result, you know. I thought it sounded big and Black Album-y. That's quite the adjective, Black Album-y. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And smash that like button, smash! No, I'm only kidding, but yeah, subscribe.
Never, never